Hello again, this is Jeff Scott, your instructor for the online version of 152-157 Website Development XHTML CSS for the fall 2015 semester at Blackhawk Technical College. Right now I'm going to be going over the PowerPoints for Chapter 10, which is entitled Web Development. There is no homework at the end of Chapter 10, and there will be no upgrades to the class website, the Donald Trump site that I've been working on. So if I can get this done in one lecture, then this will be it for Chapter 10. So again, the chapter is entitled Web Development, and you can see here our objectives. We want to describe the skills, functions, job roles, etc. for a successful web project development, talk about the system development lifecycle, apply the SDLC to web development projects, describe the activities during different stages of a website project, talking about finding the right web host provider for your website, and finally, talking about choosing a domain name for your website. All right, skills and functions needed for a successful large-scale project. So they talk about most of these job titles that you see on the screen here. And first is the project manager who oversees the entire process and coordinates the activities. You've got the information architect who clarifies the missions and goals of the site, assists in determining the site functionality, and they're instrumental in defining the site organization, navigation, etc. This might be the same person as the project manager, or it might be someone else. The next one is a very interesting term here, this user experience designer, because the whole idea of user experience, which is typically shortened to just UX, is the user interaction with a product, application, or website. So the UX designer focuses on the user's interaction with the website. You might have two websites that basically are selling the same product, but the experience that a user has with a website may determine whether he or she or they go to website A or to website B. Marketing representatives, which handle and they put together the marketing plan and the goals for the website. Copywriters and editors who proof the copy. Content managers who they participate in the strategic and creative development and enhancement of the website. Graphic designers who are responsible for the appropriate use of color and graphics on the website. Database administrators, all right, if the site information involves a database at all. Network administrators who configure and maintain the web server. They also install and maintain any system hardware and software, and they're responsible for security. Now again, that might be a whole department, that might be an individual, that might be a group of individuals, depending on the size of the company. A web developer or designer. Now there's a big distinction here. The designer typically writes HTML and CSS. The developer typically adds the logic, so also has the programmer. Now, or adds the programming. At some places, especially if you've got a small shop, the web developer is the web designer, is the web developer. But at a big enough shop, these could be two distinct roles that were handled by two distinct groups of people. Now notice they talk about some skills needed for a successful, this is a small project. Since it's small, each person may wear many hats, so they might have to do several things at once. Some jobs may end up being outsourced. All right. Project staffing criteria. Finding the right people to work on a project is crucial. And yeah, they give you some good things in here, work experience, etc. Sometimes what happens is who you have work on a project may be basically set up for you. You might have somebody who dictates to you and says you're going to have this person do this person do that. Or you might be such a small shop that there might not be a lot, everybody does a little bit of everything type of an idea. Or you might outsource all or part of it. So the development process on page 438 here, they show the website development cycle. And this is very similar to the cycle for any project that you're going to work on in IT. All right. On the top of the page, they show the SDLC, the Systems Development Lifecycle, which is a process that's been used for decades to build information system projects. There you typically have here, they call it systems investigation, then analysis, then design, then implementation, then maintenance. Well, for a website, notice they've added a few things to it here. You've modified this to apply this towards web projects. This web development cycle, as they mention on page 438, is a guide to successful web project management. So you come up with an idea. All right, you identify an opportunity. You gather the requirements. I can't say too much about this phase because it's important that you have end users involved. You design the solution, again with the end user involved. You create the content and you construct the site. You test it. Not just you test it, you have people who are going to use the site test it. You launch it. Then there's maintenance and evaluation. And you'll notice that this is very circular, all right, because in some ways at least, it never ends. So when we talk about each one of these things, conceptualization, one of the things in there is to determine the site's long-term and short-term goals and missions. During analysis, you do several things. You determine what the site will be about. You determine the functionality requirements, the environmental requirements, like what hardware will you need, what operating system are you going to be using, etc. You determine the content requirements. Does that content already exist in some other form? Could they be in brochures, catalogs, etc.? You compare what you have with what you want. You review sites of your competitors, not to steal their ideas, but to try to come up with what works and what doesn't work. You estimate the costs and time involved to create the site, and you finally do a cost-benefit analysis. Next, you move on to design, where the tasks are usually completed by the project manager, the information architect, etc. Some of these common tasks: choosing a site organization. We talked about this in a much earlier chapter. Do you want it to be hierarchical, linear, or random? Again, most of the time it'll probably be hierarchical. Design a prototype. Sketch out on a piece of paper a wireframe of what this is going to look like. Then design a page layout. Determine the visual aesthetic layout with wireframes and mock-ups. Document each page so you're sure you're going to have everything that'll be on each page. Then you move into production, where you choose your web authoring tool. You may not have a choice. You might say that, we've got Dreamweaver here and everybody's going to use Dreamweaver. Or maybe you can't afford Dreamweaver and you actually develop it using Notepad++. You organize your site files. It's important. I've been trying to do that with you. Again, if you look at the class website that I have been working on, all right, for this Donald Trump project. So remember, we've got the home, the issues, the candidates, and the contact page. All right? But if you look at all this stuff that we've been doing here, you'll notice that as we've moved along, I've got images in one folder, JavaScript in another folder, CSS in another folder, and my source is just hanging there, but I could put that in its own folder as well. You want to also be developing and testing your components during this phase, which is called unit testing, to make sure things work both by themselves and in conjunction with other parts of the site. You want to make sure when you're testing, you test on different browsers and different versions of different browsers. You want to test with different screen resolutions, especially if you're going to be doing mobile, part to your site. Test with different bandwidths. Test from other locations. You can't test enough. It's a good idea, as they mention in the book on page 443, to even develop a test plan. There are also automated test tools that you can use for this. You want to test for accessibility during this time. In Appendix F, starting on page 643, they talk about web accessibility guidelines, and they talk about the POUR acronym, P-O-U-R. The content must be perceivable, the content must be operable, the content must be understandable, and the content should be robust. All right. You have to do usability testing here. That measures, again, the quality of the user's experience when interacting with a website. How easy is it for them to learn it? How efficient is it? Is there memorability involved? In other words, is it easy to remember to how to get from here to there? Look for error frequency and severity. So you have people test it and you find out what they couldn't understand. Do some kind of a subjective satisfaction measure. Ask them, do they like the website? What's right with it? What's wrong with it? Again, this is referred to as usability testing, and you conduct it at any and probably every phase of the website's development. Then you launch it. So once the test website has been approved, it's published to your live production site, which is called a launch. Next comes maintenance. A website is never finished. It's constantly being tweaked. Finally, you go through some kind of an evaluation process. All right, you set goals during the conceptualization phase up here, and during the evaluation phase, you're going to review those goals and determine whether or not the website meets them. All right, what did you do right? What did you do wrong type of an idea. So they talk again, conceptualization, analysis, design, production, testing, different types of testing, approval and launch, maintenance, and evaluation. All right, let's switch gears a little bit on the bottom of page 446 and talk about domain names. Now, one thing to realize when you choose a domain name, for instance, let's assume right now, and I don't even know, but I'm going to go in here and I'm going to type in jeffscott.com. And you'll notice if I type that in, it tells me that site's, it looks like at least, that site, it says that this page is under construction, coming soon. So somebody seems to have that site. What if I wanted my complete name, which was, or is, jeffreypaulscott.com. You can see this web page is not available, which probably means that right now no one has that domain name. A crucial part in establishing your web presence is choosing a domain name. The domain name should describe your business. It should be brief. It shouldn't have hyphens in it. It doesn't necessarily have to have .com on the end. All right. It should contain possibly one or more keywords that the site is about. You should avoid anything that's been trademarked. You should know your character, or territory rather. And again, like I'm doing right here, verify availability. Now, one thing you have to watch out for, I can go to GoDaddy, for example, and I can see whether or not jeffreypaulscott.com is available. But what oftentimes happens when you do that, when you go out and check whether or not an actual website name is available, people can check to see who has checked for certain websites. And when they do that, they'll sometimes go and buy that domain name. That's called cyber squatting. For instance, if somebody had been smart, I don't even know what this looks like right now, but if I go to barackobama.com, and you see there is a site, and it looks like it would be Obama's site. All right, but possibly had I listened to his speech at the whatever it was, 2004 convention, I think it was, when he was the opening speaker for Bill Clinton, and said, this guy's going places. And I could have checked then to see whether or not barackobama.com was available. And if it was, I could have bought it. Then later, if he wanted it, I could have said, well, Mr. Obama, if you want it, I can sell it to you at a price. Web hosting, there's a couple, really 2 or 3 main types of web hosting as shown on the bottom of 448 and the top of page 449. Some places use virtual hosting, where basically I buy space on a web server from some company. I may share that, all right, with a bunch of other people, but each one of us has our own little slice of the web server, so to speak. The web hosting provider, its web server is divided into a number of what are referred to as virtual domains. So you can set up multiple websites on the same computer. If I've got a big enough site, I could have dedicated hosting, where I rent a server and house it possibly in my own company, and have somebody else be in charge of maintenance of it. Or I can have what's called co-located hosting, where I purchase my own web server, I configure it myself, and I'm responsible for the maintenance of it. All right, some of the things, again, you should consider. How big are you now? How big do you plan on becoming, etc.? And a lot of times you don't know the answer to those questions. Choosing a virtual host on the bottom of page 449, the author says a number of factors to consider when choosing a web host have been discussed, including bandwidth, disk storage space, technical support, and availability of e-commerce sites. All right. So they give you in the book, and I'm just going to show this to you. All right. This is that web host checklist right here that's on page 450 in the book. And before I finish this up, I'm just about finished, but if I come out to here and I look here and I go out to page 450, you'll notice when I look out here, here is that web host checklist. All right? And it's just a start. You may want to create your own also. Again, please remember, there will be this is it for my lecture on the chapter. There is no assignment for Chapter 10, and I'm not going to update the Donald Trump website for Chapter 10. All right? When I get to Chapter 11 on page 457, give you a quick little review of what's left, we talk about website multimedia and interactivity. Then when we get to Chapter 12, which begins on page 503, we've got an overview of e-commerce. I hope to have something simple for Chapters 11 and 12 on the Trump site. We'll see. In fact, I might even combine those into one page. I may have a little e-commerce shop, and I might put a video or something underneath that. I don't know. Chapter 13, which starts in our book on page 533, is on website promotion. All right? Not going to go and do any addition to the website based on that. Finally, on Chapter 14, which starts on page 557 and is the last chapter of our text, a brief look at JavaScript and jQuery. I'm going to probably go back and try to add something or other to the website where I bring in some kind of a jQuery component. So that's what we have to look forward to in the last 4 chapters of the book.